Assistant Defence Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Labor cannot be believed when it comes to education, cannot be trusted when it comes to too much at all, Deputy Speaker. I'll just take the Shadow Minister up on a couple of things. She talked about Labor's funding policy, but, you know, this parliament governs for a nation. This parliament governs for the Commonwealth. And when Labor left office, its half-baked education funding policy didn't take into account Queensland, didn't take into account Western Australia and didn't take into account the Northern Territory. You've had your go, just be quiet. Now, over the next 4 years, this government is putting almost $70 billion into schools. This government is putting $54 billion into higher education, and this government is putting $13 billion into schools. Each and every year, this government spends more than $9 billion on science and research. Record investment. In government, Labor cut $1.35 billion from its own policy designed to encourage students to take up mathematics and science. In government, Labor promised 2,650 trade training centres but delivered just over 300. In government, Labor cut $1,000 million for apprenticeships. In government, Labor spent $2.1 billion on a productivity places training program where 1 in 2 people failed to finish, 1 in 2, and of those who did, only 1 in 5 found a job, and made $6.6 billion worth of cuts to higher education and research funding, and left significant research infrastructure with absolutely no funding whatsoever. Shame on Labor. Shame on Labor. But today is an exciting day, Deputy Speaker, because when we're talking about innovation, and that's what the Shadow Minister's matter of public importance debate was highlighted about, we talk about the Defence White Paper. Now, I noticed, and I listened very carefully in question time today, that question after question, minister after minister from our side was talking about the Defence White Paper. But what do we see from the other side? Not one question. Not one question was asked about the Defence White Paper, the most significant Defence White Paper that we've had, the first to be fully costed, I might add. But what did we see? The only thing that Labor was interested in, today about defence was to question shamefully the appointment of the member for Bass as chair of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security. And the member for Isaac said bipartisanship is put at risk by Mr Nikolic, who has made his political career out of being a highly partisan, highly aggressive battler for extreme right-wing views. And he continued, Mr Turnbull again, regrettably, pandering to the extreme right of his party, and if that will be the case that Mr Nikolic becomes the chair of this very important committee, what we'll be seeing is in fact turning a national security matter into a political plaything of internal machination. Political plaything, that is disgraceful. The member for Bass has done more for national security, more for the Australian Army, more for the Australian Defence Force than, let me tell you, the member for Isaacs could ever hope to. Shame on the member for Isaacs. I cannot believe that he would even call into question the member for Bass's credentials for this important committee. Now, I have to say that the member for Bass once headed the Australian Army Recruit Training Centre at Kapooka, and he was the first to come through the ranks in 1979 as a recruit, as a soldier recruit, to then reach that high elevation to command that important base. That important base, I might add, which is going to receive significant funding under the Australian Defence White Paper, announced by the Prime Minister and announced by the Honourable Senator Maurice Payne, the Minister for Defence, this morning. Now, the member for Bass has every credentials. As a member for the Army, he completed 3 postings to the Middle East as UN team leader in Israel, Syria and South Lebanon, Chief of Staff and Deputy Commander of Australia's first contribution to Afghanistan, the first Australian National Commander in southern Iraq. I could go on. And for the member for Isaacs to question to question his credentials to head up that important committee, I find disgraceful. And he should come into this chamber and he should apologise. He should apologise, but that's showing typical form by the member for Isaacs. He gets out there, if anybody treated national security as a plaything, it was Labor, because when it came to defence, Labor did not give a shit. Did not give a shit about defence. Not one ship did they order. Not one ship did they order.
No, look, I'll do it. Order. The Minister for Defence will not use such language, and he could withdraw that word. I do not intend to repeat it for him. He knows what it is.
Well, they didn't build one ship, Deputy Speaker. Labor did not build one ship. They did not.
I misheard. I thought you were using another word.
No.
So I apologise.
Labor did not build one ship. On its watch, under 6 years, Labor did not build a ship. Labor put defence spending as a proportion of gross domestic product down to its lowest level since 1938. And we all know what happened. We all know what happened in 1939.
Was it?
We talk about innovation, and I listened carefully in question time today. We didn't hear too many questions about defence from those opposite, but I listened carefully. I listened to the Minister for Veterans Affairs. The member for Bendigo should be quiet, because the member for Bendigo, and I acknowledge the Bushmasters, that wonderful Australian invention comes out of her electorate, but there's so much more in the Australian Defence White Paper, and there's so much more through the regions. I hear from the member for Herbert. He knows how important the Australian Defence White Paper is going to be for the regions, and the member for Bendigo should be quiet and listen to just how important the Defence White Paper is going to be. We heard from the Minister for Veterans Affairs talk about Melbourne-based Moran trailers, where they're going to be able to put jet engines onto those Australian-invented trailers. Significant. And that company is going to grow from 250 jobs to goodness knows how many. We heard the Prime Minister talking about the $16 billion cut from defence by those opposite. We heard from the Foreign Affairs Minister talking about the United Nations Secretary-General, Ban Ki-moon, and saying that the greatest threat that we face as a globe, the greatest threat to international stability and peace. And that is why the Defence White Paper is so significant. That is why the Defence Paper is so important. But do the others care? All they did in question time today was mock and knock. You could see it. You could see it when the member for Wright stood to ask his question. They just laughed. They just laughed, Deputy Speaker. Disgracefully, they do not care one iota about the Defence White Paper, but they should, because we are in troubled times. We are in times where our national security, unfortunately, is at risk, and that's why the Defence White Paper is so important. We heard the Minister for Immigration talk about the 12 new offshore vessels which will be ported in Darwin, in the member for Solomon's electorate. So important. I mean, those opposite just think that the Navy was there to help them stop the boats, but unfortunately they didn't stop the boats, and we had 800 of them coming here unauthorised during their watch. Now, the Minister for Industry, Innovation and Science talked about the high-tech manufacturing, which will come as a result of the Defence White Paper. Defence in industry is a pillar, he said, of our defence capability, which is so very important. And we talk about the additional $29.9 thousand million which is going to be put into defence over the next 10 years. Fully costed, 10-year integrated investment program, $195 billion to be invested in defence capability over the next decade. $26 billion to upgrade defence bases, almost $1 billion of which will go to the RAF Wagga at Forest Hill and the Kapooka, the Army Recruit Training Centre, which the member for Bass so capably and so honourably led from 2003 to 2004. $19 billion to operate and maintain the defence estate, taking in many, many areas throughout the regions that the National Party and the regional Liberals so proudly represent. $5 billion in enhancing defence's critical ICT. And at this morning's announcement, that brought a rousing cheer from those present, those wonderful ADFA cadets, those wonderful young people who are the future. And when we talk about defence capability, we're not just talking about machines and weaponry, we're talking about people who will drive innovation, people. There will be more of them under a defence force led by the coalition, funded by the coalition, funded by this government, which recognises the Defence White Paper and the importance of it. It's time Labor should get on board.